Digging that lipstick, by the way.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Naughty girl lipstick.
Oh my gosh. You. Okay. See, you would distract everybody right when we start, but welcome. We are talking
Hello,
tonight.
everybody.
We're talking about the practice of spiritual surrender. And we have a couple coaches, a couple guests that are actually joining us at the roundtable to chat with us and to just look at different aspects of this in their own lives, how they maybe think about the term, because I feel like wouldn't you say that this is a term that you even like weren't into when I was like super obsessed with surrender, like starting a couple years ago? You weren't like always about it. Do you remember that?
Well, we come from two different worlds on the development of the word surrender, coming from the world of recovery. Even going back further from that, I had a really hard time with it, because from my background towards the end of my, shall we say, adventures in alcoholism, like for me, like when I started hearing the word surrender, it felt like I was, laying down my sword and shield, which kind of it is what it is. But I felt like, I had to keep the fight up. I had to always be fighting, and I had to be ready to fight, and I had to fight everything and everyone, and I didn't know how to relax. And so, it was a journey with the word surrender, and it's really the understanding of it's been transforming for the last couple of years. You certainly are way ahead of me on the understanding of it, and it's important. So for sure.
I wouldn't say I'm way ahead of you, because I don't know about you, but I feel like coming to this term, like at first I was going to call it the art of surrender. And I was like, I don't know, that makes it sound like very like untouchable or something. And I'm like, I feel like it's a practice. And like this concept of like allowing and flowing, to me, like it doesn't feel linear. It doesn't feel like, oh, I've just been doing this so long, I'm just so great at it. And I don't know. Like I feel like maybe I've gotten better, but I don't feel like I don't know that this really ends. I feel like it's just like a human being thing. What do you think?
Honestly, like, to be quite honest with it, I find it a fucking struggle sometimes. I'm not even gonna fucking lie. Like I'm getting a new handle on it, I hope and I think. But a lot of times, once you become aware of the need to surrender, I don't know if you feel the same way. Once you become aware of it, like there almost becomes like a passage of time where it's like, okay, I'm good with this, and then you hit this like road where it's like, I'm not surrendering. I don't know how to surrender to this. Like a certain concept or a want or a relationship. It's like, oh God, I'm not surrendering to this, and it feels like a struggle until you can get back into like the spiritual flow of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do want to define it for people, because I think for some people using the term like this might be completely new. Mm-hmm. But I think what I'm like hearing you say, it's like when you first learn about something and you're really like now conscious about it, then you're like, oh wow, like I totally am really bad at this. I'm totally failing at it. Whereas it seems like you were like better at life sometimes before you knew about it. Is that kind of what you're feeling?
Well, if I can I, how like I always compare with stuff. I have Michael Singer's, because you got me into this book, and now it's like all I can talk about now. People don't be that person. But it's all I talk about. When I get into a book, that's all I talk about. And there's a passage from it this is from the Surrender Experiment, and what he says is, if life can manifest the DNA molecule on its own, not to mention create the human brain, how is it we feel we have to control everything on our own? There must be another, more sane way to approach life. For example, what will happen if we respected the flow of life and used our free will to participate in what's unfolding instead of fighting it? What would be the quality of life that unfolds? And when I read that, I was like, shit, and at first it felt contradictory to my understanding. What are you laughing at? Like a crazy person? You're scaring me.
I think, well, I don't know. Sometimes your audio gets unsynced, and so I might be responding to something different. But no, I'm laughing at you because you're just a funny person, even talking about serious things sometimes.
Rude. But as I was saying, that really, I thought it was contradictory to the art of manifesting or laws of attraction. But then it made a lot of sense that if you lean into life and just go with the flow, the miraculous things that can happen instead of fighting the flow of life. And I find myself fighting the flow of life quite often.
I wanted to share the definition, and I actually got it from that book. So the book that we're talking about is The Surrender Experiment. And that's the book that I guess Oprah, if I'm being really from the beginning of this journey, she has like her Super Soul Sundays, and I really enjoy and love Oprah. And I'm like, okay, if Oprah is telling me there's something to this like spiritual surrender, like I want to learn about this. And then The Untethered Soul, I feel like in the coaching community was like one of the books that you hear about, like everyone's talking about it. And I remember you and I were even in a room of coaches together, and someone's like, have you read Surrender Experiment? And then like 14 people were like, oh, yes, like that. And I was like, oh, like apparently this is like a book that's like a favorite of many people. And so this is Michael Singer's other book. This is a book that we're kind of inspired by around this topic that you're in the middle of reading, that I read a few years ago. And it's not surrender like putting a like white flag down, right? Like giving up, because I think that that's the way that surrender is used in, most of our, I guess, languages. But spiritual surrender, the way that it's defined in this book, and you might be able to kind of like tweak this a bit and fine tune it, was really coming to, or allowing life to come to you and to show up. And instead of having immediate preferences of, I don't like this, or I do like this, really taking and setting your personal preference aside and really internally, like from a deep place, asking the question, like, what is life like bringing to me right now? What am I here to experience? What might be possible for me if I really just went with this universal flow and trusted that it was taking me somewhere? And so that's the way that I'm seeing it. That's the way that I'm holding the term, because I do feel like for me, thinking about it that way, almost as in steps, like, okay, this is what I focus on, and then this is what I do next. It really helps me because like you're saying, this does not come easy. Like, I feel like as a mom, especially right now, I literally like I'm breastfeeding and I get bitten by babies, like just sometimes surrender into those moments where there's very physical and sometimes painful parts of motherhood, and to just like surrender and be there and just, be exhausted. And I fail at it a lot. Honestly, I do. Like it's a challenge for me, but what do you want to explore? Like beyond talking about what it is, like what are some things that you hope to get out of this conversation, even like from our guests as well, because we have two amazing coaches and women that are joining us.
Well, I think that hopefully from these guests that you've found that seem very, very well versed on a lot of questions that I have, it's going to be about that when the ego gets back involved and you're trying to lean into the surrender. And Michael Singer, he uses a lot of examples about like, and it harkens back to this book, I forget who wrote about The Year of Yes, where like, things come up and he doesn't want to do it, but it's because his personal preference is involved, not because it's going to ruin his life or, it's just it's just an inconvenience to him. So he ends up saying yes a bunch of times or like agreeing to it. And life unfolds in these magical ways because he's not fighting it. So I find myself when the ego gets back involved, we're talking before we came on about like dating and like understanding a new realm that I'm in, where I can't it doesn't feel good to me anymore to just have casual sex. I'm in this new realm and I want to fight it because I enjoy sex. I know that sounds like a big overshare, but just surrender to that. I'm not of that nature right now or anymore. We'll see. More will be revealed. But the ego wants to get involved and control things, right? Like, and that's probably how you feel with your kids in a different spectrum. Like the ego wants to get in and control things. And, once you have that knowledge of surrender and how if you just go with it, the unfolding of life will take you in a direction you didn't expect. But my ego wants to fight it every goddamn goddamn time, man. And so that's what I'm hoping to garnish from this conversation and these women that are going to be joining us, and from you. So yeah, how to tell the ego to shut the fuck up and let life do its thing.
And
are you having a deep thought right now?
Always. But the thing that I still struggle with this topic around, that I haven't come to an answer around, a great answer around, because I do feel like there's times where intuition comes into play, because that's my thing. And so thinking right now, we were talking about how I'm really surrendering to a lot of directions, like within my business, that I feel like I asked for, but it's showing up in this different way than I expected, and surrendering to that. And I also know that there's going to be other types of opportunities that show up. And so it makes me think, well, where does that line come in, where we also have that intuitive part, right? Like, it's like, of when we get to say something, right, might not be for us. Because I do feel like while it's easy to put just like a blanket like rule, like we love having like these rules that just like kind of can be our instruction guide to life and being like a spiritual person, I do feel like there's all these different nuances, and that ultimately we do have to, like you're saying, kind of maybe differentiate of if it's coming from ego or control or inner critic, or if it's like something that is coming from like a deep intuitive place of like honoring our values, or honoring something that we desire. Like, do you see how it can start to get like, or feel a little complex if we add that in?
Well, I mean, it's super complex, but I wonder how much of it is that you and I and everyone else makes it complex. You know what I mean? And I bet I get what you're saying. Michael Singer, I love him. He is like one of my favorite authors ever. But like, he makes it seem so simple, you know? Yeah, like I just read today this story where he's talking about, he comes back to his land and they're building like a house on his land. And at first he's like a little upset about it. And then he just like accepts it. And like, I'm like, I don't know that I could fucking do that. Like, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, get your shit. Like, but so like, I think that's a perfect example. But I mean, how much of it is that us still not leaning in and trusting the universe, or how much is there like legit, like, that's too much, you've crossed a boundary, you know? And if we back down to that level, like, what mysteries and what beautiful life can unfold, you know what I mean? Like, I really want to go with this, but I get what you're saying, especially with you with like kids and a husband. Like, I have it a little bit easier because it's just me, you know, in this boat. But then like, you have like your clients that you work with, and then, you know, I have sponsees that I work with, and it's trying to preface like, okay, when can I just say yes to shit? Mm-hmm. And when do I have to be like, no, and draw boundaries? So I'm really interested to see what these coaches got to say, these authors got to say, because I am lost in that kind of realm.
Yeah, I agree with you that like, he says yes to some very big things. And it's like someone asked me to go to like a shamanic retreat in New Mexico, and I would have like loved to go, but I can't just be like, peace, Bob and kids, like, I'm just going to drive to New Mexico.
Here's some breast milk. I hope this will get you by.
Like, you're right. Like, it's sort of like, there's a lot of things, you know, to
like
look at.
So many nuances. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I am going to bring in Vanessa now, who is our first guest, and she is a coach and an author, and we'll just let her like share a little bit about her story. Hi.
How are you guys?
We're good. Thank you so much for being here, because after I saw your link in your book, like, first of all, like, you use the word magic a lot. So I was immediately a fan of you.
Oh, thank you.
A language.
Well, I looked around on your site and I'm like, well, she likes to use intuition a lot. So I automatically loved you too.
So would you be willing to share like a little bit about just your relationship with surrender? Something that made you say like, yes, like I want to be there and be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it as I was listening backstage, I was just like so eager to jump into this conversation, because you said something about, I was going to call this the art of surrender, but it's hard to call it that, because I have to agree, there's nothing really graceful about it. You kind of have to fall apart and you don't know how far you're going to tumble. And in my book, it's called Falling Together, A Tale of Believing in Your Own Magic. And in this story, I am like on the up and up. I'm building my career. I cannot go wrong. It seems like I'm walking on water. I'm pregnant with my first child. I got it all together. I've got a million things going on. Book clubs, all these friends, things to do, people to see. My life is just perfect and I'm in control. That is what I think. That is what my intellect tells me. And it wasn't until a very visceral moment when all of a sudden my life fell apart. The husband who I thought loved me left me when I was 6 months pregnant. And everything just kind of brought me to my knees. I was completely leveled, so humiliated, so embarrassed about what had happened to my life. And I didn't have anywhere else to go except inward and to surrender to the fact that I couldn't control any of it. I thought I had it all under control. I thought I had this trajectory and this very specific life path chosen. All of it wiped out instantly. And I had to start over with 3 months left to figure out how to get my head right before the baby came. So time, pressure, yeah, a little bit. And I had to, in that moment, really walk my talk, because I have been a student of spiritual law for over a dozen years. And I had known people have dark nights of the soul. These are the breaking open moments. And I hadn't had one of those, not that big. And I said, here's my time. This is my chance. There is nowhere else to go, and I will not let my baby down, will I? Can't fail before he's even born. So I had to find the blessing, find the silver lining, and let go of the control that I thought that I had. You know, that's one of the saboteurs that many people have, is this uber controller. Like, if I hold on long enough and I say to life, this is how you will operate for me, I'm going to always be in control. Well, guess what? Nope. Doesn't work out that way. Didn't work out for me that way. And what really was beautiful about the whole situation was that it did break me open. It broke me open to a whole new level of spiritual understanding, because I lived through it. I walked the talk. I lived it, and I saw the other side. And on the other side of forgiveness is this beautiful, magical thing. And it's this power of your spirit that kind of pulls you through it, propels you forward. And because that's what I radiate out into the universe, that is exactly what I attracted back. And I am telling you, in record time, I manifested the life I wanted. James, I feel like you need to say something right now.
I think his audio is a little slightly.
Oh, it is. Yeah, he's saying something, but we can't hear him.
I think that's why he was getting confused. Sometimes it'll, I think, get wonky. But James, if that's what's going on, in case, see, I think it comes and plays back. You know, we're gonna surrender to that. Like, I feel like there's times of me that wants to control that. And it's just like, well, we're gonna surrender to it. So here's what I'm curious about. Mm-hmm. Was there a centering thought or a thing that you told yourself repeatedly that got you through those moments of trying to control it?
The universe has my back.
It's a test. It's a test to the universe.
Mm-hmm. I did say that all the time. And you know what I did repeatedly was gratitude lists. I would sit on the train and go to work every day and just sit with my journal and write down just 3 things. If I could think of 3 things that I could be grateful for, I could get through the day. And it was just one step at a time, because some days I didn't want to write a damn thing. I really didn't. It was hard. And even though I thought I'd reached my bottomed out and that I had completely surrendered, well, then I'm going through a divorce. And you know what that brings out in you? Is a bunch of egos and barking dogs. And so I had to continue to let that happen. Like, it's not graceful. You think you let that anger fuel you, and you think that's going to make you stronger. and then it's your ego speaking again, and then you just get knocked right down again on your ass. So it comes and goes up and down over and over. And that continuous thing for me really was the practice of gratitude.
Did you hear how we were talking about like a little of those weird nuances of like, well, when is something just maybe too far? Like, do you have any views? Because sometimes it's easy to be like, yes, it's black or white, but when we're in it, there might be moments that aren't. How do you see that?
Well, I don't think anything's really ever black or white. You know, it's a very personal journey, and nobody can really tell you you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. You know within yourself when you really have started to trust. When you trust that the universe does have your back, and I kept saying it over and over to myself, even though sometimes I didn't believe it. Seeding my subconscious with the belief was what grounded me and helped me to move forward. But is there an exact science, an exact way to pull through? No, absolutely not. I think every spirit is different.
I want to leave spaciousness because I bet James has a question, but I feel like if I leave him spaciousness, then the audio thing will.
Yeah, let's give him a minute.
Yeah.
Well, am I synced back up yet?
I don't know. Just say something.
He left.
It's kind of funny though, because in some ways, like it's kind of the perfect thing to be happening, like for this topic in some ways. Like, as awkward as it is to just like not know what's going on and be live, it's like my word for it is relax, because I did hypno babies with both of my kids, and I think that like I see people doing like the ice bath things and like kind of surrendering to that and sort of using the body. So I don't know about that. I'm going to add you back in, James. But I did the hypno babies, which is like self-hypnosis, like natural childbirth. And it was sort of like the term relax was allowing your body to relax into it and not fighting it, like actually physically not resisting it and making it more painful, but just like allowing your body to do its thing. And so I didn't connect it until really more recent weeks, but I'm like, maybe that would work like in other times in life to use that same like hypnotic cue, but in just everyday life, not in sort of a hard physical experience. So
yeah, I absolutely believe that. Yes, repeating that to yourself, I think it would work. I mean, there's something about leaning into it. You know, when you allow yourself to, I think I read every book about divorce as I was going through the divorce, but I forget the name of the book it was that I read this in, but leaning into the pain, allowing yourself to feel the pain of what you're going through. It's that whole process coaching too, right? You feel the feelings and you allow them to flow through you, not define you. And therein lies a lot of freedom. It's just letting it come through and then letting it go.
James, say something. Okay, I think you're back. I think so.
That was. I was gonna talk to you when I see you tomorrow, Ashley, about like I've been noticing like a lot of weird things with like electronics and like I don't know, but like in other people's lives too. Anyways, Vanessa, I just want to say like thank you so much for telling your truth, man. Like that really, you gave me chills when you're speaking, and you got like the perfect voice for audio. So I don't know if you've done an audiobook yet, but I could listen to that all night long. But I wanted to ask you the big challenges, and that's amazing. Everyday nuances. That's where I think I'm really struggling. If you have advice on that, I think that once we have a little bit of spiritual clarity in us, we get so affected by people, places, and things, and that's where I lose my surrender capability. And if you have any advice on like the day-to-day, how to surrender to the hustle and bustle of life and other people.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to be fully present in where you are, and then allow yourself time to notice when you're triggered, right? you feel that, like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like my heart's beating out of my chest, or something happens to really piss me off, and I feel like my blood is boiling, and you can sense that adrenaline rush kind of coming. In that moment, that's when you have to pause. That's when you have to kind of put all your toes planted on the ground, kind of try and feel each one. Just a physical way to ground yourself, or even just kind of feeling your own fingers or something. People won't notice that. Just divert that energy somewhere else. And that allows you the spaciousness to say, okay, why am I feeling this way? First, just get curious, and who do I want to show up as right now? Because I could say a few choice words, or I could speak from my higher place.
I love that you say get curious right now. I love that. It's a very Ashley kind of thing to say.
It's a very coachy, I think.
It is.
Coaches are very curious. We're naturally curious people. I think that brings us into coaching. So I don't know. I think Solange was moving, and she's usually the one that helps us drop the links. So we might just need to drop them after. But what I do know is that your name, people can see your name if they're watching right now. And so VanessaLynnAuthor.com /book.
Here, I'll do this so you can see my
book. Yeah. So I want you to find her. Like, maybe, I bet if they even Google your name, they'll be able to find you in your book as well.
Absolutely.
And I'll make sure we put the links in the show notes. But can you just tell people more about like how they can find you, or your book, or anything that would help them? Yeah.
So if you want to find my website, it's VanessaLynnAuthor.com. And you can find me on Facebook too, Vanessa Lynn Author. Pretty easy to find. And on Instagram, I'm at Your Leader Within, which I'm sure will bring a smile to your face, Ashley. It's part of our training.
Yes. Yeah. And I just want to thank you. I feel like there's probably other topics, like now that I know you and I know your book, I feel like I think James is thinking the same thing, that I'm like, oh, like, you know, the topic of divorce, or like for people that are going through divorces or separation spiritually, like, I feel like I'm going to tap you again and be like, hey, will you come back and talk to us?
And I will totally come back. I would love to be here. Like, you guys have such good energy, and it's so easy to talk to you. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Vanessa. I really appreciate you.
I love her.
I know. Me too.
Oh, love you too.
So much, Vanessa.
You're welcome.
Bye, Vanessa. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye,
so I think
Vanessa.
you're synced up
So nice
before
to
we
meet
bring
you.
Sherry. Are we unsync?
Hold on. Am I synced up now? Okay, am I synced? Watch my mouth. Am I synced? Because that was driving me nuts. But I was surrendering it. Okay.
I have Sherry.
That was driving me nuts, but again, surrender.
Spirit. It's spirit being so funny with us, trying to mess with some things and be like, oh, these bitches want to talk about surrender. Let's see what they do with it.
You're so spiritual. Let's see how spiritual you are right now. And I'm like busting blood vessels over here.
Oh my God. I'm gonna bring in Sherry now. Hi, Sherry.
Hi.
Welcome to the mat.
Hi, Ashley. Hi, James.
I'm glad you saw that awkwardness. I don't know if we can promise you the same level, but we can promise you that there's a lot of kind of weirdness and fun with us, regardless of audio
Bring
stuff or not. But I was excited, so we'll make sure we'll drop.
Is that our podcast promise?
Yeah, the promise. But so Sherry is a coach as well from a coaching community that I'm in. And so I know that you like to explore topics that are like taboo or a little bit different in your podcast. But what was it that like got you excited to talk about surrender today?
Yeah, when I saw that you were talking about surrender, I was like, yes, I need to talk about this, because at the very beginning of the year, well, really November of last year, November is my reflection time. And that's when this sort of bubbled up, this idea of surrender. It came from a coach that I had at the time that was like, if you release control, everything will be perfect. And at that time I was like, no, in what world does that operate? Like, that is not how the world works. And it really, I kept reflecting on it. And surrender has become a very powerful word for me this year. It's my word for 2020, pre-COVID, and then COVID and our social uprising and our government right now has forced me into surrender in many ways. And it's a practice for sure. And I really want to be in discussion with people about it because it's a practice and it's not easy, like you guys were talking about. Yeah.
So surrender, I think, was my word, like when I was reading the book a few years ago, but I still have up in one of my work areas, like these glittery letters that they say surrender. And it was kind of like on a party banner and they were glittery. And I'm like, I need this so much that I'm going to like craft and like have it in my face all day because
smart.
I feel like even, I don't know if I think it's just one of those things. Like, what have you been finding challenging about it? What's the wisdom as well of getting this word?
Yeah, the challenges are easy. There's a lot of them. I think the challenge of surrender is fighting my own need to control. I come from a background of project management and before that engineering. So I was like, the culture, the world has molded me into a place of control to deliver in the workplace. But that was really how I saw the world. I saw my life, and needing to undo all of that and really trust that it's going to be okay, which is faith. Even though I'm not particularly religious or even spiritual, it's just that feeling of I have to let go. I have to believe that it's going to happen was a practice. Did not come easy for most of the year. But with time and with practice, it really has become, because I witnessed that happening in my life, because I have found ease, because I have found that it works, then it helps me practice it more and more in bigger and bigger and bigger ways. My relationship would be a really key place where that happened, was just not trying to control myself, control the other. Coaching is another place where you learn to not control the situation and dance in the moment. You have this banner of surrender in my email. Every year at the beginning, I write an email that says, what's my word of the year? And what do I intend? What's the meaning of that for me, at least in that moment? And it really was like just the way when you dance. I don't know if you guys dance salsa or any other partner dancing, where you just have to trust and sort of flow. And there's a beautiful moment where neither person's in control and you're sort of playing off of each other and sort of co-creating in the moment. That was my intention. It didn't work super well in the first half of the year. Was really trying to fight everything going on. And at some point I was like, right, that was my word. Let me practice that here. And it's gotten easier. It's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah. So am I synced up?
I think so.
So Sherry, I'm really, really intrigued by you. I was, Ashley sent me over some information and I'm really intrigued by you. And I can see you treading lightly on some of the stuff that you may be working to surrender right now. And I feel you on that. And I just want to ask you, like, with our current government and the social issues that we're really facing now, help me, give me some pointers on going from, I don't want to become a victim, but I know the need to surrender. Does that make sense? Like, I want to make sure I don't get into victimhood. And like, I tread this very fine line between being an activist and becoming an angry, bitter man and trying to find that balance. So do you have any words on that? Because that's my current struggle and surrender right now. And I know Ashley and I have private conversations about it, but you seem like the person to turn to for a little advice on that.
It's so funny you said that, because that is exactly what's unfolding for me. I recorded a podcast with my co-host this weekend over this topic exactly, because I'm like, it's really hard to hold surrender, living with life, flowing, co-creating with the universe. And then what happens when, no, this is the time to stand up, to fight for something, to say something. And when I'm trying to navigate that, I go between my own health, right? And like, it would be easy to skip over what's happening and sort of live in a little privileged space and ignore that and be very Zen. And I've been sort of exploring Buddhism as a way to center and ground, and I get there and I'm like, well, this feels really good on my own. Like I took a solo retreat, and practiced a lot of just being with whatever was present and moving with whatever was present. And I was like, this is wonderful. It's here. I'm out in, the woods of Pennsylvania, and I can just relax. But how do I engage back in real life every day without becoming incredibly toxically angry, where there's rage, and which was frankly March, April, May, June, July. So a good part of this year. And so on the other end is, I think where I'm at is I need to metabolize the anger and the rage. And that means being with it, holding it, processing it, whatever I need to do to move it through my body. I use my body a lot to help me ground. And if I'm being with it, that's also a form of surrender, because it's really easy for us to avoid difficult emotions. And so that's where I think the practice of surrender and being with it in the body helps move it through. And then I can sort of approach still the action I need to do from a place of centeredness, from a place of this aligns with my values, and I want to create from here. And that's where I'm at in here. I'm working on the practice.
Yeah. But I love that you say that, because you know it, and you can feel that Zen moment, but it feels like it can right now, currently, it feels like it can be only moments, with the climate that's going on. Because I was reading like some of the topics with you and your co-host, and I like instantly my heart lit up, because it's like, oh my gosh, someone that gets it. And like my fear is what looms ahead. You know what I mean? The month ahead, and how to really surrender that. We have little control in that. We can vote, we can speak, we can be activists, we can march, but the little control we have, and to be okay with that I've done enough and rest my head on the pillow at night. That's what I really struggle with right now, that kind of surrender. I don't know if that made sense, but I loved everything that you guys. And real quick, how can people find your podcast again? Because I really want to get involved myself with the podcast and everything you guys are talking about.
Thank you. Yeah, probably the best way would be at Unfolding Sharp Corners. That's the name of it, on Instagram. And from there, you can also link to Spotify, Apple, Google. But it's called Unfolding Sharp Corners. And we talk about painful things that we're trying to unlearn, relearn, and do that with each other and with our community of listeners.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. You were talking about it. You used a different word that I really liked, but with the anger, that it has to transform. And I see people, and you probably see a lot of people right now, like even with your clients, that have the anger, but like we're recognizing that like the anger is like, it's a starting place, right? It's sort of like this raw material that we can alchemize and then turn it into something different. And I don't know, like, are you also seeing it like spark like things in people in terms of them moving through barriers of discomfort to actually like share their gifts with the world, to like write that book? Are you seeing a lot of that too right now?
Yeah, I think we can't talk about anger, especially in this context, without thinking about grief as well. Right. So I think that's what the metabolizing does, right? That we're spending a lot of energy feeling either angry to avoid feeling the grief, or to avoid feeling something else that we're not ready to deal with. And when we can metabolize, process, move through, Also, not to say that there's anything wrong with anger. Like, anger is incredibly valuable. I think there's something I read today. It was like the difference between anger and rage is where you might want to be, thinking about your own health. But anger in and of itself, especially when we're crossing boundaries in relationships and society, is really important. It's telling us that something's not right and we need to work with that. So I think the holding, processing of anger, sadness, grief, whatever else is under there, is the movement, is surrendering in some ways. And then comes the energy to go back out and live liberated, to be free, to live your fullness and hold accountability for our society, for our relationships, for whoever you're trying to work with. But yes, it is very much evident that some folks it's anger, some folks it's just straight to grief, and hopelessness,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel you on that one. On that one.
And if we're with it, then we can move from hopelessness into, all right, let's be with that pain and then move into action.
Yeah, like I always love how people talk about emotion being that it needs to stay in motion, that it needs to cycle through. And I think it was really Michael Singer's other book that talked about how we really do kind of trap it and we stop the cycle, whereas animals can like shake off or do things to move.
That's right.
Through the full emotional cycle, and that it's kind of like we're bumping into all these stuckness. I mean, I know I was always just utilizing coaches, and now I'm like, oh, like I'm in therapy. I feel triggered. I feel unsafe. Like, what's here? Let me go and process these things that I've ignored. So I do see in a lot of ways, like COVID really keeping people still, because a lot of times we don't want to feel those deep emotions. So we have our busyness, right? That I do feel like that's a part of the reason why it actually might be happening for us and moving us towards this like greater awakening of humanity, is that people are almost being forced, unfortunately, like by the world around them to like be with it. And I guess I just hope that they are finding some kind of support. What support I feel like comes in many ways, something for them if they need it, right? To know that they're not alone and that it's completely normal. That's why I always like to talk about it. I'm sure why you like to kind of talk about and normalize, like, hey, these are things that we all feel. Like, what comes up for you there?
Yeah, I think we had, my co-host and I, we talked about when COVID was first coming through, this idea of, all right, what's possible on the other side? What is this portal? And of course, like we now know this portal is very long, a lot longer than we thought in the beginning. But and how to like live those values now and live like that now. So there was this other idea based in, there's a concept called social Aikido, which is like, Aikido is a form of martial arts where whatever energy is coming at you, you don't go against it, you roll with it and use it to move into the next thing. And in social Aikido, that's okay, whatever energy someone's coming with, you take it and you're like, roll with it and move into, moving into the next phase of that conversation, using that energy. And so we thought about, well, what is this energy of COVID? And if it is destructive energy in a good way, like I don't think destruction is bad, right? That destruction happens and new creation and life can come from that. And so this destructive energy of COVID is coming. Okay, how do we intentionally destroy? What do we need to intentionally destroy? And use that energy to do that, and then let that open up something else to come forward. That's where that takes me. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned grief in it though, because Ashley and I, when COVID first really hit and what became aware, like I really was at peace with it. I was like, and Ashley and I had beautiful conversations, like this is the great awakening and everyone's going to stop and see what's really important in life. And we're going to value when it could have been that. And I feel like as this has spanned out, unfortunately, our culture has been trained not to think in those peaceful terms, and it kind of turned ratchet. And so for me recently, it's been grief that this great opportunity of a great awakening was missed. And there comes with it that rage at society, our government, and other people for not letting us have this great moment of awakening. and everyone's just so selfish and so full of themselves and thinking about like their rights, that like we miss this huge opportunity and having to surrender, being really indignant about that. So that's where I'm at with it. And then, of course, our election's right around the corner. And it's like, I have to surrender people's rights to vote for people that want to take away human rights, and surrender that I have no control over that. I know that was more of a rant, but do you feel me on that?
I do 100%. I mean, I have a friend who talks about like everything is unfolding as it should, right? And that there is this destruction is happening, and that is not easy to hold, because there are people getting hurt, and not just now, the trauma lasts for generations, right? That's important to acknowledge. And we talked about, what if the election had been different in 2016, right? Would we just be kicking this can down the road, right? And in some ways, like, is this forcing us to hold these conversations that we were otherwise avoiding, and it sucks that that's what it takes, that moment. There was that 2-week period even where everything did shut down, and it was a little scary, but it was also, this is another way that the world could be. We could build a whole new way of being, right? Everything is a choice in the way that we live. But I don't think we've missed the opportunity. I think we have that. It's happened, and there's something we can like make that real by like, remember this happened. This is possible. And we don't have to live the way we have lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years, But those are big, hard, long, nuanced conversations to have.
Well, thank you for bringing the positivity to it. I just had to be honest and roll out these things that I'm trying to surrender, and it feels like all these great opportunities keep getting missed. And I think that like this book hit me at the perfect time, and the whole concept of surrender, because I'm like, here's another great opportunity. Another great, and like really surrendering that it's not mine to control. And you said, Ashley says it all the time, like everything's unfolding as it should. And sometimes I'm like, sometimes I'm like, really, motherfucker? Like it is? Like you sure about that? So thank you for bringing that positivity to it, because I just wanted to throw it out there that's what I'm really trying to surrender. Like, that toxicity in the world is not mine to control. It's my own toxicity that I must control and, really come to terms with and really nurture the good parts of me. So thank you for the positivity. I needed that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, what you said about going inward to ourselves is so key. That is, in all of these situations, that is the work that needs to happen for everyone, right? We ultimately, the best work we can do is go inward.
Remember,
Thank
change,
you,
remember. Thank you so much, Sherry.
I know. It's hard.
So Sherry has her podcast, Unfolding Sharp Edges.
Corner.
Corner. See, I'm sorry.
No worries.
This is why we need Solange, and she's not here today because I'm not very good with the rubric. Okay. And so we will put that in the show notes if anybody is listening to this in podcast form, and we'll put it in the comments as well. Any other places where people can find you, Sherry, or where you want them to see what you're up to?
Yeah. So at Hatch and Bloom on Instagram is, again, the easiest way. And there's a link there to my website. That's probably the best place to reach me. And of course, our podcast. Yeah.
Thank you,
Well, I
Sherry.
hope you'll come back and join us again, Sherry, because there's going to be a lot of issues coming up with the next couple months that I hope you'll join us for.
Definitely. Same. And we'd love to have you on our podcast too.
Oh, I'd love that.
Bye, Sherry. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Thank you both. This was great.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Sherry. So when I hear women like Sherry and Vanessa like speak, like there's this sense, I don't know if you experience this, of like almost feeling like I want to come, like the tears welling up, because I'm like, these people are so beautiful. This gives me faith in humanity. Like, look at these like brilliant women. This is why politics and like leadership needs more women. Like, listen to these women. Like, I just like feel kind of enamored and so like very in awe of like women like Vanessa and Sherry. And so I don't know. I just want to give them a moment, a shout out.
Hold on. I want to, you're one of those women for other people though, right? Like, don't get it twisted. You are of that grade. And that's why women like that join our show, is because of you. You are that woman to me. So I want to give it a shout out to you to realize your own power and magic. I love you more. And
I'm trying to receive better because there's times where it's hard. It's hard sometimes. Sometimes you just have to surrender to like receiving things, receiving like love and compliments and just like enjoying that. Because I don't know who conditioned us or who told us not to, but somehow a lot of us have that, right? In us. But I think it was just really cool to hear different perspectives and really like different places in life that this is showing up for people, because I think that this is for everybody, right? Like this isn't just for somebody that's on like, at the top of a mountain, like meditating. Like this is really like something for all of us right now that really brings us like more like peace and contentment and like fulfillment to just like be with life and be present with it. So I'm glad that we had this conversation. Like, what are things that really jumped out for you today?
Well, again, it was surrendering, because I really wanted to engage a little bit more with Vanessa, because I am that person that feels that like when like great tests come, I can rise to it. When it came time for me to finally surrender and get sober, I was able to rise to it, handle it, get through it, my childhood, rise to that, get through it, death, rise. But like, it's the everyday nuances that I really have to surrender. And I think surrender, it's not just, it is for everyone, because we're surrendering to the human condition, and I love that the surrender experiment is kind of a pre-sequel to the Untethered Soul, and really lets you know how it came to be, because his whole journey was he one day realized there was a voice in his head, and he became obsessed with trying to quiet that voice. And it sent him on this like whole escapade to his current standing as like this great spiritual leader. But I think the great takeaway is we have to surrender the human condition. The human condition is really, we're souls on a human journey, and no one's going to get it right. We're all going to mess up. We're all going to get messy, and we have to accept that messiness, and type A personality like you and I can be sometimes. We don't want to surrender to the messiness, we want to control it. We have the best intentions of controlling everything for everyone involved. We're going to make it the best possible, but we have to surrender to how messy it is. Your nipple getting bit, you got to surrender to it. So it was really refreshing to hear those two women. And I get really jealous of how great everyone's voices is, including yours. I feel like I have like a really annoying voice, and I hear them and I'm like, oh my God, like everyone's voice is so beautiful and peaceful. And why can't I be more like that?
I'm going to like not ask you. I think they probably have coaching questions that are coming up in their heads, and we're not going to go there right now. But you do have an amazing, beautiful voice. And I bet it even is at like a perfect like healing frequency that just like activates something in people. So that's my story about it.
Is that your theory on my voice?
Yeah. Here's the other thing that I think, like, because we talked about the world like falling apart in all of these different places, and I always think about that. I already know deep inside me that like, oh, this is like the thing that we came here for, to like rebuild this like new like version of what our world looks like. And it's sort of like we don't like they're kind of bringing themselves to the ground. That's always a sense that I get, right? Of like surrendering to that and knowing that in that place of like comfort, things don't change. And I think Vanessa's story talked about how it does feel like a lot of destruction and chaos and messiness before that new like space, right, is opened up for something new, like really what we've been dreaming about and what we've been wanting the entire time to like come in. And so I think that there's that sense of like surrender. I think I got to it through intuition, and it allows me to maybe better surrender to what's happening because I really feel that is like, there's a purpose to all of this. And the other thing, and I'm included in this, is like, I see for a lot of the people in my community, people that do a lot of spiritual work, like healers, light workers, there's a lot of people that are having things activated in them, different gifts, or even like calls, like to write a book. And that can be very uncomfortable, like to let a part of you show that's never shown before, and to actually like attempt a thing that feels like really big and huge. I know that like sometimes it actually is just surrendering to your own magic and leading with your own magic, and really not being afraid to stand up and be different and share your gift. And so that's the one that I think is very like close to my heart right now. But so I feel like it is sort of like the everyday things and these like massive things at the same time.
Totally. I mean, again, what I really struggle with is the tumble this last year has been of like, okay, this is where the destruction is going to end and the rebuilding begins, and then there's like another level of societal destruction, and it's like, okay, this is where we're going to really see where we're at, you know, a rock bottom, if I can talk about it in recovery terms. This is society's rock bottom. We're going to build from here, and it's like, nope, we're going to keep on going. And so it's been really frustrating. And then on a personal level, like I've been really realizing reading this book, like the human experience in me is like, oh my God, like you're 40 and like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? And like, and thank God this book came and went, because like, nope, we're not doing that, you know? And a lot of conversations with people that I work with in the program is like, you do the next right indicated step. You follow and you keep your head down and do the next right indicated step, and you trust the universe. And I'm really trying to get back into that and not keep my eye on what everyone else is doing on what I'm doing. So I love that, you know, she was speaking of, you know, the inward work. So I need to get back inward, you know, not worry about outward, inward.
So I want to tell you that Lisa loves your voice as well. So just wanted to show you that in case you needed that today. But thanks everybody for watching. I know that you and I don't actually think that we know yet what we're talking about next week for our topic. I think we're figuring that out together tomorrow. But we do have our group, the Spiritual Rebels and Misfits Roundtable, our group on Facebook, so that we can continue to like engage in these conversations. We like to try to find guests there first when we can, to hear like what's going on with you. What topic would you love to see discussed? So if you're like watching today or watching the replay, like find us in there, because that's really our intention. Like, I think that's really your vision of this as well, is like having continued like deeper conversations and connections, like in a place like that.
Well, a lot of time I don't give a shit what you and I necessarily want to talk about, because you and I want to know what everyone else wants to talk about too, because that's what I know you're the same way. You get really curious about like what, and then getting really enthralled. So what does everyone else want to talk about? I know I and that fucking pendulum are going to decide tomorrow what the topics are, but you know what everyone else wants to talk about. So yeah, absolutely.
I like seeing like patterns though. So like if people are posting what's going on with them, and like I have like a way of like seeing the pattern of it. And then like, I think that's a coach thing as well, of like pulling out the topic. And so you don't have to have like a perfect or beautiful way of like saying it, but like just hearing where you're at so that we can see the pattern, and so that you feel like the topic that we discuss like gives you, I don't know. I don't even know what I want to say exactly right now, but something about collectively like sharing wisdom on an experience is really powerful and healing in itself. And like, that's what we want to do. That's what this roundtable is about. But anyway, we'll just keep talking if we don't end this. So right. We love you, and we want to thank you for being here tonight, and we'll see you guys next week.
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.